and ask all the other storytellers right now, except for Kirk, I guess, to mute themselves. All right.
You're muted.
Welcome, everybody.
And I'm going to try and pin the video, you know, spotlight the people who are talking. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome, everybody. So happy to have you again at the Contra Costa Tail Spinners. It's just such a pleasure. I thought about the library today because I meet out in front of the library with a friend of mine. Oh my wig isn't quite right. Hold on, hold on. I've got COVID hair. I've lost it. Anyway, part of the great COVID experience, I guess. Well, anyway, I'm so happy to have you all with us tonight. And I was thinking about the library, and I thought, I better write to them and tell them we're still on and have them reserve our room. And I thought, room? Oh, really? Room? Oh, well. So anyhow, here we are, safe and sound and ready to begin an excellent night of stories. Welcome all. Take it away, Liz.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to be the Zoom master, and I have one request, is that if there's anybody here who feels confident on Zoom and is willing to be the co-host for this meeting, because Shags, who's our wonderful SAC board representative and who's been co-hosting and hosting all these swaps for all the groups, he can't keep staying on all of these all the time. So if you are willing to be co-host for tonight, if you kind of know what that means, could you just put it in the chat? If you're, yeah. If you're somebody who knows how to be co-host, you would know how to put it in the chat, and I'll send you a private message. So, okay.
Yes. A little test.
All right. Okay, Lance has volunteered. So,
hey, Lance.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Okay, and I have also a message. I'm going to thank you, Lance. Let me make you co-host before I forget, okay? Oh, Lance.
It's a teacher thing.
Yeah, right. Now, Lance, your name disappeared. I'm just afraid if okay, Lance. Okay, I'm making you the co-host. All right.
Thank you, Lance.
And I have an apology. Every time I have an apology. And tonight's apology is to Camille, because I seem to have always leave somebody's name off the list. And I left Camille's name off the list this time. So Camille, I'm going to re-put the list on, and I will put you after Larry, okay, towards the end, but before Sally. So big apologies. I just somehow can't quite get it all together. So we're all doing the best we can, right? Right. Okay. All right. So Camille, and I don't have all the details, but then Sally to close. Okay, so we've got a great lineup tonight, and the lineup is starting with our featured tellers. We have two for the price of one. Kirk Waller and his son Elijah. And just as I was thinking about tonight, I was thinking that I think Kirk, that the first time I ever met you and saw you tell a story was at the Orinda Contra Costa Tail Spinner Swap. Yeah. And so it just really made me think back. And so we've known each other a long time. And when I was the storytelling director at Stagebridge and I left to go to Washington, D.C., I could leave with a very, very full heart and a lot of confidence, because I had talked to Kirk into coming and becoming the new storytelling director. And I mean, not that it was my choice, but I was so happy that that happened, and he took the program so many places I couldn't have even taken it. So that not just is Kirk a wonderful performer, multi-talented storyteller, musician, he's told stories at the National Storytelling Festival in Tennessee, all over, lots of places all over the Bay Area here. And his son Elijah is also following in his footsteps as a wonderful performing artist. And we just are so, and Kirk has been our featured teller before, and we're so happy. And I think Elijah has been up on our stage too, and we're just so happy to welcome them back. So I am going to cancel my spotlight. And you know what I'm going to do, which I haven't done? Oh, it is recording. Good. I guess, thank you, Shags, for getting the recording. Okay, but in the meantime, let's get the spotlight on Kirk. Okay, I see two. Yeah, so this should be it. Let's see if that works. Okay, can everybody see? Yay! Okay, welcome, Kirk and Elijah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you, everyone. For coming.
Let's all mute except for Kirk. Everybody mute yourself.
Muted.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for inviting us. And I just have to say before we start, yeah, I think you're right, Liz. The first time we met was at Lorinda Swab years and years and years ago. And I think Mary Jo was the featured teller that time, if I remember right, probably 15, 20 years ago. And then another time, years later, Sally and Liz had asked Elijah and I to tell a story. I think he's probably about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 or so. And he was getting started in theater. And now 5, 6, 7 years later, he's 15 years old. He's been in like over 30 plays. You'll see when you do the story, he's like, he got theater all in his bones. And so we're gonna have a lot of fun sharing this story with you. And then right afterwards, I'm gonna do one short one by myself. So sit back, kick back, relax, and enjoy the story. Because all the animals, they've been jumpy, and they had been jittery, just plain looking over their shoulder, scared.
And you know why?
Why?
King Lion. What? You see, King Lion, he was going around beating his chest, shaking his mane, and roaring his roar.
I'm the king of the forest, yeah. I'm the king of the forest, yeah. I'm the king of the forest, yeah.
And when he did that, all those animals, they'd run, they'd duck, and they'd hide for cover.
And not only that, every time King Lion did his thing, one of those little animals would just disappear.
You mean like black magic disappeared?
I mean like King Lion disappeared, if you know what I mean.
Oh. And you see, those animals, they got tired of King Lion. So they decided to call a meeting.
Right there in the middle of the forest. All of them came too. Big old bear, he was at the meeting.
Raccoon was there, little birdies, they're all there.
Don't forget about Rabbit. He was at the meeting too.
Big old bear, he slapped his big old paw down. He said,
What we gonna do about King Lion?
And then all the animals chimed in and said,
yeah, what we gonna do about King Lion?
But they didn't know what they was gonna do about King Lion. They didn't have any good ideas, but they knew Rabbit always have a good idea in his head if they could just get it out. So they all looked at Rabbit, and Bear said, Rabbit,
What we gonna do about King Lion?
and all the animals said, yeah, Rabbit,
What we gonna do about King Lion?
So Rabbit just kind of sat there a while, twiddled his little rabbit nose, playing with his rabbit whiskers, you know how they do, fiddling with his long rabbit ears. And finally, when he knew he had their attention, Rabbit said,
I think we need to invite King Lion to this meeting.
Bear kind of looked at him and said, what you talking about, Rabbit? Then all the animals said,
Yeah, what you talking about,
Rabbit?
Don't worry, don't worry. If my plan works, this will be the last meeting King Lion ever attends. That mean old lion always pushing us around. That mean old lion always making us frown. He was beating his chest, letting out his roar. That mean old lion, that mean old lion, that mean old lion won't be pushing us no more.
All right, so all the animals decided to give Rabbit's idea a try. Bear went and got him, brought him from his cave, brought him to the meeting. When King Lion sat down, he just kind of stared at all those little animals.
And all those little animals stared back. Then King Lion said,
I'm the king of the forest, yeah. I'm the king of the forest, yeah. I'm the king of the forest. Yeah.
and when he did that, those animals, they ran, they hid, and they ducked for cover.
Wait, not all of them. There was one that didn't hide. I bet you know which one it was. That's right, Rabbit. Now, don't get me wrong. Rabbit was scared. On the inside, he was shaking like a wind-whipped leaf in the wintertime. But on the outside, he was cool. He was calm. He was like a moss-covered rock in the middle of the forest. And King Lion, he noticed it too. So when all the animals came back around the table, King Lion looked at Rabbit. What you bring me to this meeting for, Rabbit? I got things to do.
Oh, I know you're a busy king, but you see, we want to make a deal with you.
A deal with me. I'm the king of the forest. You don't make deals with the king of the forest.
I know, but you see, it's a really good deal.
Go on.
What about, say, around dinner time? One of us animals comes to your cave,
Uh-huh.
and all you got to do is stop bothering and scaring us.
Wait. You mean one of you animals will come to my cave around dinner time, kind of like a home delivered meal, and all I gotta do is quit fussing and scaring you little animals? Sound like a good deal to me, Rabbit.
So King Lion, he went away all smiles and giggling. But those other animals, they weren't so happy.
Bear just looked at Rabbit and said, "What you trying to do, Rabbit?" All the animals looked at him and said,
Yeah, what you trying to do, Rabbit? Oh, don't worry. If my plan works, and it will work, this will be the first and last home-delivered meal King Lion ever gets, and I'll be the first one to go.
So, later that evening, King Lion was in his cave, waiting.
Bib around his neck, knife in one hand, fork in the other.
Just waiting. And waiting. And when he saw those animals wasn't gonna come, he lost all patience. And he started to go and get those animals. And right at that moment, Rabbit comes running in the door of the cave.
King Lion, I am so sorry I'm late. You see, it wasn't my fault.
Okay, Rabbit. That's all right. You here now. Let's go ahead and get started.
I'm sorry, it just wasn't my fault.
All right, you said that already. I'm awfully hungry, so let's get started.
Yeah, just to let you know, it was that other lion.
King Lion put down the knife, put down the fork, took off the bib. What other lion?
You know that other lion. He said he's the king of the forest.
I'm the only king of the forest.
Well, I know that king, and you know that king, but that other lion, yeah, he don't know that.
Take me to this other lion.
So that's exactly what Rabbit did. He led King Lion around trees, over rocks, around logs to the other side of the forest. And when it got there, there was this well, this hole that was dug deep in the ground. And at the bottom of the well, there was water.
And you see, King Lion, he's never looked deep in a well before. So when he looked down and saw his own reflection, he thought it was that other lion.
Roar!
And when King Lion roared, it echoed right back up.
Roar! I'm the king of the forest.
And it echoed right back up. I'm the king of the forest.
And when that lion heard that, he got so mad. He jumped in that hole to get that other lion.
And I don't know if he ever got that other lion, but he sure won't be bothering us no more.
That mean lion's always pushing us around.
That mean lion always making us frown,
He beating his chest.
letting out his roar.
That mean lion.
That mean old lion.
That mean lion won't be pushing us no more. Thank you. Thank you, Elijah. Oh, that was so much fun. Getting to do a story with my son. All right, thank you so much. So I'm gonna just as a little bit. And I got one more. It's kind of a story, kind of a song. You know, I don't break out the banjo much in the Zoom COVID days just because it's kind of hard to get the balance and all that stuff. But I just want to share because it's short, just short enough for the time that we have. And I think it's a nice touch to end this little segment because it's a song, but it's about a story. And just think about the stories that you've heard tonight, the stories that you're gonna hear, your favorite stories. And as you just kind of reflect on kind of your journey into storytelling, whether you're a listener, a teller, a little bit of both, or just remember your mom or dad or grandma telling you a story. Take me to another world where there's a boy named Jack and a long-haired girl, a king and a queen, a dragon too, a tricky little rabbit that might trick you. Just tell me a story, one more story. Tell me a story. Tell me just can I have it? Let me hear one more story. A genie and a lamp, a fairy and a wand, a magic mirror and a frog in a pond. Take me up into outer space a long time ago, a future time and place. Just tell me a story, one more story. Tell me a story. Tell me just can I have it? Let me hear one more story. Just one more story. Now look, I see some of you kind of nodding your heads and playing along and singing along. If you want to jump in on the chorus, don't worry, we're not going to unmute and have 40 people singing on Zoom. But if you want to sing at home, the words are really simple. The chorus is like, tell me a story, one more story, tell me a story, tricky part, tell me just, can I have, let me hear one more story. All right, let's try that. Tell me a story, one more story. Tell me a story. Here we go. We just tell me just can I have? Let me hear one more story. And it really doesn't matter what kind of story it is, right? It could be fiction or folk tales or fairy tales or epics or myths or true stories. Tell me about when you were young, when the days were hard and the nights were long. Tell me about how you fell in love or how you got your big toe stuck in a tub. Just tell me a story, one more story. Tell me a story. Tell me just can I have, let me hear one more story. Tell me about the olden days. I wanna hear about my grandpa's ways. What he looked like, did he fight in the war? Tell me, please tell me, or just tell me that story that you told before. Just tell me a story, one more story. Tell me a story. Tell me just can I have, let me hear one more. Can I just tell me how, let me hear one more. Can I have, tell me how, can I hear one more story? Thank you.
Clapping for everyone, but you can see that we're all clapping.
Let me just thank you before I run off the stage, and I'll come back to hear the other ones. Is at Stagebridge, I don't know for those of you familiar with Stagebridge, but I was there for like 10 years or so. They invited me back to be a guest artist. I'm gonna be teaching a class in the next few weeks. And so look up stagebridge.org if you're interested. I think there might be a few slots, I've been told, but I'm not quite sure. So if you're interested, check it out. We're gonna be doing a storytelling class. Hope that's okay to mention. Sally's always plugging the swap at Stagebridge stuff, so I thought I'd plug Stagebridge at the swap. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And can we get Elijah back for a minute so we can like give you one more applause? Or he may be gone, but all right, this was just woohoo, everybody. I don't know, guys should look at the chat. It was, I mean, I think we all feel, Elijah, like, you know, we've seen you grow up and you're such a beautiful young man. I'm getting verklempt. it's just beautiful. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your school this year. Especially for kids who are in drama and performance and every kind of performance, right? This is a tough year. I know it. Anyway, thank you so much. All right. I'm gonna cancel the spotlight on them. And now we have lots more wonderful stories. And our first storyteller is going to be Karen Werner. And Karen, while you unmute yourself, I will spotlight you. Okay. And Karen is going to start us off with a very old story. We've been having a lot of personal stories at our swap, but tonight we're going to have, for those of us who love the old stories, we've got quite a few. And Karen,
You can't get a story much older than this. For this was a story that took place when Zeus ruled all from Mount Olympus. And in those days, only the gods had the gift of music. And so it was that Hermes, the messenger, made the lyre and gave it to beautiful Apollo. And when he played, it was ethereal and heavenly. And when the gods and goddesses heard this music, they could just stand still and think of nothing else. Hermes for himself made the shepherd's pipe. It had enchanting music and all loved to hear it. And Pan also made a pipe, but his was more simple. It was out of reeds. And although it was a simple instrument, when he played, it sounded like the nightingales in spring. Athena, wise Athena, made a difficult instrument, for this was an instrument not only difficult to play, but difficult to control. And it was said that it was so enchanting and exciting that when folks heard it, they would dance ecstatic dances well into the night. Now, the muses did not need instruments, for their own voices were so beautiful, they needed nothing else. And anyone who heard them thought that they were just incredibly wonderful. Now, in the next thing that happened was some mortals began to get some gifts. And of these was Orpheus. It was Apollo himself who gave Orpheus a lyre and taught him how to play it. On his mother's side, Orpheus was more than mortal, for she was the muse Calliope, and it was she that taught him to sing and dance. On his father's side, his father was the Thracian king, and it was well known that the Thracian people were the most musical of any in Greece. But even there, Orpheus had no equal, and everyone who heard him was transfixed. It seemed that no one and no thing could deny or ignore his music, for it would move anyone who heard it. He was almost equal to the gods, but not quite. In fact, no one or no thing that heard him could resist. The trees and the plants would move to the rhythm of Orpheus. Even the rocks would tumble down the hills when they heard his sound. The rivers and ponds and streams would change their direction to follow Orpheus. And so it was that even the birds and animals were so enchanted that they would follow him, singing and jumping for joy as he went along. Now, we are not told how he met or how he fell in love with the nymph Eurydice, but we do know that when they met, they fell in love instantly, and they knew that they would be soulmates forever. They wanted to get married soon, and they did, but their love was not to last. For one day, when Eurydice was dancing in the meadow with her nymph friends. Orpheus was watching from the trees as she danced, and all of a sudden a shepherd saw her as well and began to pursue her. She was frightened and she ran as fast as she could, but all of a sudden a terrible viper, a poisonous viper, sprung up from the grass and bit her on the leg. She fell screaming in pain to the ground, and Orpheus rushed to help her as fast as he could, but she was dead by the time he got there. He cried out in sorrow. He cried out and prayed to the gods to bring her back, but they could not, for she was already in the underworld. Orpheus was overcome with sorrow, and he knew that there was only one thing that he could do, and that was to follow her to the underworld and plead with the gods to let her come back with him. And so he set out on a journey that no man had ever taken before. He went with his lyre down to the underworld, and all who heard him grew silent. The terrible hound Cerberus with his 3 heads stopped snarling and barking and flew silent and let him pass. Tantalus knew no thirst, and even the muses, the terrible muses with their ugly faces, grew wet with tears. And all who saw him were quiet. When he finally got to the gates of the underworld, he had first to cross the river Styx, and even there, Charon, the ferryman, gladly took him across. He walked up with his lyre to the gates of the underworld, and there stood the king and queen of the underworld, Hades and Persephone. Poor Orpheus sang and prayed to them, prayed that they would let her come back to him, that he could have his Eurydice for just a while longer. He did not ask them for immortality. All he asked was that she be allowed to live her full life. They listened to him sing, and even they could not deny him, and agreed that Orpheus and Eurydice could go back to earth together. They summoned Eurydice and told Orpheus that there was only one thing that he needed to remember, and that was that Eurydice would follow him to earth, but he must never look back. He must not look back until they got to the sunlight, and then he could turn. And so they went out, Orpheus in front, Eurydice behind, climbing up and up and up. Orpheus knew that she must be behind him, but since she was a wraith, her footsteps made no sound. So when Orpheus saw the sunshine ahead of him, he ran joyfully into the sunshine and turned to greet her. But it was too early, for she was still in the dark. And as she felt back, the only sound he heard was farewell. Once again, he ran back to rescue her, but the gods would not agree to letting him enter the underworld for a second time. So there he was again on earth, alone with his lyre. The only thing he could do was wander mournfully, singing mournful songs in the solitudes of Thrace. He was so beset with anger and sorrow, and he didn't know what to do. He cried out to the gods and said, "I will never have the love of a woman again as long as I live." And on he went with only the trees and plants as his accompaniments. He came upon shortly a group of very angry women named the Maenads. They were furious when they had heard what he had said. They were furious that he would say he would never love a woman again. And when they saw Orpheus, they fell upon the gentle, gentle Orpheus and killed him. They tore his limbs from his body and severed his head from his neck and threw his lyre and his head into the river along with his limbs. And it traveled down the river to the sea. The lyre and the head still singing mournful songs, always singing mournful songs. When his body and remains finally got to the sea, they were found on the banks of the island of Lesbos by a group of muses. They gathered his head and his lyre, and they buried it in the sanctuary of the island. Then they gathered his limbs and took them with him to the mount where they found a place to bury him at the Mount Olympus, where to this day they say that Mount Olympus has more beautiful nightingales than anywhere else. Orpheus went on for many, many other times, and he managed to, I have run out of time. I'm not out of story, but at some point I'll tell you the end and I will get off on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was beautiful. Myths never quite end, but you gave us a full story with a lot of power to it, and the power of silence as well as the power of music. Thank you. Okay, our next storyteller on our list is Donna. And Donna, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and I am going to put the spotlight. All right, let's see. You're still muted, so see if you can unmute yourself.
There we go. Unmute.
There you
How's
go.
that?
Good. Okay, let's welcome Donna. She's going to tell us a personal story this time. I just have to say that before you start, Donna, that I hope some of you were there at the SAC genre story event for SWAP, and Donna told a wonderful folk tale and represented our SWAP and did us proud. So let's hear your story tonight.
Okay. Just give me land, lots of land, neath the starry skies above. Don't fence me in. I don't know if you've ever been to Zion Park in southern Utah, but in 1991, our family had not. And we were looking for a new and different place to backpack with our 10-year-old daughter, Megan. We'd heard how beautiful Zion was, and so we borrowed a trail guide from our neighbors across the street, Roger and Audrey. And we settled on an area not in the main canyon of Zion, but up in the back country that sounded like it would be very beautiful and not too busy. So about 2 weeks later, we were driving up a very steep, winding road out of the town of Virgin, population 439, and the landscape that unfolded before us grew more dramatic and more beautiful with every mile and every turn that we made. Lush farmscapes gave way to pinon pine and juniper. And before long, we found ourselves in a gray-green sagebrush valley, surrounded all around by these tilted pillars of the famous red rock that the Southwest is famous for. So we made our way across the valley to the trailhead and camped near the trailhead. In the morning, we got up and packed ourselves and got ready to put on our packs and got ready to go down to into Hop Valley. We started down the steep, rutted path, soon to be joined by enormous red bellowing cows, which we had not expected, but we managed to share this area, and we got down to the valley itself, which was lush and green, and down the middle of it ran a broad stream, a creek that kind of spread out into a lot of the meadow. As the sun began to be below those beautiful outcrops on all sides, we realized that we needed a campground and a dry one. And we noticed that there was a bluff off to the east with a path that went up to the bluff. So we started up the path and we got up there and we found ourselves a lovely, dappled spot looking out over the end of the valley. And we each started our jobs. Tim's job basically was to set up the tent with Megan's help. My job was to put the ground cloth down and make sure that there weren't any rocks or cones underneath that we would have to sleep on. So I reached into my pack, I got out the ground cloth, and I was just about to lay it down when I heard that sound. In that part of the country, you probably know that that means a rattler. I must have screamed, and I'm sure that I jumped back very fast and as far as I could. And the thing is that my husband, Tim, was a naturalist at Tilden Park. And he was well known for putting a snake in his shirt with a room full of second graders or an outdoors full of second graders and ask them where the snake might be. And eventually he would reveal his secret to screaming giggles and in some cases fear, which he then used as a teachable moment. I, on the other hand, had been reared by a mother who grew up in Copperhead and water moccasin country. And so I was, and I hate to say it, but still am, terrified of snakes, especially any that surprised me. The snake, of course, just did the wise thing, which was to slither off into the grass and leave our brouhaha behind. So we went about finishing making camp. Now, we had not seen a single soul since we started out that morning, only the cows. But now, perhaps 20 yards away, we heard footsteps on the trail that went past our campsite. And I thought, oh my God, this might be someone else like us who doesn't know that there are rattlesnakes out here. So I called out, you, I just wanted to tell you that we were setting up camp and I saw a rattlesnake. And there were two people over there. One of them, they both looked about our age. The man just tipped his head back and roared with laughter. Oh, lady, you don't know. You are in the Manhattan of rattlesnakes. Well, soon they were over with us and we were getting to know one another. And it turned out that Alan, the man, lived in Columbus, Ohio, 9 months of the year, and taught philosophy at Ohio State. I don't remember what Jane did, but we shared who we were, and it turned out that we had a lot of things in common. For one thing, we both subscribed to The Nation magazine, and we had the same opinion of our then president, George H.W. Bush. Not to mention loving the outdoors and hiking and backpacking. Well, they were headed down toward the end of the valley, and they had a different route in mind than we did, but we parted and agreed to meet at Alan's cabin, which it turned out was where he spent 3 months most of 3 months of each year, up in that beautiful blue-gray sagebrush valley that we had driven through. So we agreed to meet there in 2 days, and we did. This was the beginning of a 30-year friendship. For many years, we would go out most every summer and either spend it hiking in and around Zion with Alan and whoever he might bring along at that time, or we would take off on a road trip around other parks in the Southwest. Alan at that time was a widower, a recent widower, which is another sad story. But later he married Diane, which was a very happy story. And they got married in, go figure, Texas. So we all went down to Texas, and our daughter Megan made their wedding cake. Megan and her now husband, Travis, have been out to the cabin. I asked her today, and she said she thought at least 5 or 6 times in summers since then as adults. Alan came to my husband Tim's 80th birthday party here in Berkeley, and we went to Alan's 80th birthday party in New York, where they lived then. I come from a very small family. I have one sister, one daughter. I have one sister, we have one daughter. I do not have so much as one cousin, niece, or nephew. But to me, Alan is family. And before I told this story, he and Diane, as I was writing this story, he and Diane are in the cabin, at the cabin now. And she can still hike, but Alan can no longer take the long hikes, and they're actually having a hard time with the altitude. It's about 6,000 feet. But very glad to be there and able to listen for the coyotes and watch for other wildlife and sit out under the stars at night, watching the meteor showers and using the new telescope. I sure wish that I could be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. That was beautiful. You took us You took us far away, and stories, family, nature, those are all what we all need right now. Thank you. Beautiful. Our next storyteller is Andre Wilson, and Andre has unmuted himself, I think, and we'll put the spotlight on him. All right.
Thank you. Long before there were steamships, sail ships sailed the seven seas. The Atlantic was 3,000 miles wide and 5 miles deep. Also, mermaids in those days. If the mermaids overheard the name of a crew member, they would demand to have him by name. And if the crew did not throw him overboard, the mermaid would tear the ship apart and everyone to drown. After a while, the captains got very smart. They changed the name of their crew members to various objects on the ship. The captain would say, "Scissors, go swab the poop deck." And the crew would toss a pair of scissors overboard to the mermaid who yelled, "Give me scissors!" Back down to the ocean. The ship continued on its way. The next day, the captain would call out, "Suite of furniture, go make up the furniture." So the mermaid would jump out of the water and demand, "Give me suite of furniture." Crew would throw all these pieces of furniture overboard, like tables, chairs, clocks. And the mermaid would grab the furniture and sink back down to the ocean. But one day, the captain forgot. The captain said, "Sam, go to the galley and fix supper." The mermaid lifted out of the water alongside the ship and said, "Give me Sam!" "What have I done?" The mermaid began to bang, 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 tear at the ship and yell, "Give me Sam! Give me Sam!" And the crew ran up to the captain and said, "What shall we do? We have nothing else on this ship named Sam. If you don't give the mermaid something named Sam, in a moment, she'll tear the ship apart and cause all of us to drown." Sorry, Sam. But whatever you do down there, do not tell the mermaid that you like fish. And Sam, the color cook, said, "Aye, aye, sir." And his shipmates threw him overboard, over the side of the ship. And the mermaid leapt out of the water and grabbed him and said, "I got Sam! I got Sam!" And the mermaid had this long green hair that wrapped around him and formed a diving bell that plunged in the water and swam, and Sam was able to breathe inside. By and by, the mermaid arrived at this cave in a sea cliff that was very tall and lacked a beach at the entrance. The only way to enter and escape from this cave was by water. The mermaid untangled her hair from Sam, deposited him on the shore inside of a cave. And Sam looked around the cave at all of these pieces of furniture and cookware and things that had been tossed over the ship instead of crew members. And a mermaid with her long green hair, purple lips, half the body of a woman and the tail of a fish, slithered and flopped up to Sam and said, "You look pretty good. Do you like fish?" Sam said, "No, ma'am, I won't even cook the stuff." "Well, let's marry." And so they did. The mermaid, when she ate, she ate her seafood not only raw, but alive. See, lobster, sea bass, swordfish. Well, Sam had seaweed and seagrass. By and by, the mermaid slithered up to Sam again. You look pretty good. Do you like fish? No, ma'am. I won't even cook the stuff. Very well, then. The mermaid continued to eat her raw seafood while Sam had seaweed and seagrass. But during all this time, Sam studied the mermaid. He observed that when she slept, her hair continued to move and twist about her head because it was alive. And he recalled how the hair had totally wrapped him up in a diving bell and brought him safely to the cave. So Sam got an idea. The next time the mermaid slithered up to him, you look pretty good. Do you like fish? No, ma'am, but I know how to prepare the finest seafood in the world. What? You know how to prepare the finest seafood in the world? Yes, ma'am. As a sea cook, I traveled to ports all over the world, and I learned various recipes for preparing raw fish. It would taste sure a whole lot better than the plain living raw fish that you eat now. Very well then, let's feast. And so Sam banged around the cave to the various cabinets and pots and things that had been tossed overboard, while the mermaid swam out and brought back various types of seafood. And Sam prepared a magnificent feast of raw seafood for the mermaid. And the mermaid ate it and said, "Oh, sushi from Yokohama, carpaccio from Napoli, ceviche from Valparaiso. This is the best feast of raw seafood I ever ate." Ate and ate and ate and got fuller and fuller and fuller and tireder and tireder and tireder until she finally fell asleep with her head of living hair on Sam's lap. When Sam was sure that she was asleep, he got out those pair of scissors that had been tossed overboard earlier and carefully clipped off her head of living hair, which now began to twist and wrap around his arms. And he tiptoed away from the mermaid to the entrance of the cave overlooking the sea. And the mermaid awoke, said, "What happened to my hair? What happened to my hair?" And she looked and she saw Sam at the edge of the cave with her hair begin to wrap around in the form of a diving bell. And she yelled, "Come back to my hair! I can't leave my cave without it." Hair finished enveloping Sam and plunged into the water and swam away. And by, it arrived at a beach. And the hair, like long tentacles like an octopus, untangled itself from Sam, left on the beach there. And the hair went back to the ocean, slithered, and it sunk out of sight like a giant jellyfish. Sam had spent 6 years with the mermaid. And he wanted to get as far away from the Atlantic as possible before her hair grew back. And yet, he wanted to keep far away from the Pacific in case she swam around to the other side. So Sam, he settled in the Midwest, where he became a farmer. And he never saw the sea again.
Thank you, Andre.
You're welcome.
Wonderful story.
Thank you.
If any of us need a primer on how to use Zoom to really be like enhance your story instead of feeling like it's, makes it harder to tell a story. You just gave us a lesson, and you just, wah! Wonderful. All right. So our next storyteller is Lance McVeigh, and after Lance is going to be Jane Cole. So Lance,
I am unmuted.
okay, and since he's co-host, he highlighted, he spotlighted himself. Okay.
Did I? Am I spotlighted? I don't know.
I will make sure you are.
Okay. Spotlight. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I wasn't going to tell tonight, but because I don't like repeating myself, but I've been so bogged down with teaching that I felt like I just needed to get out and tell something, anything, just to get back, back into living, I guess is what I'm thinking. So I'm going to tell Brian and the boys' school, though with Andres, now I kind of wish I was going to tell Merlin and the Mermaid to keep thematic, because that was great. But I'll do Brian and the boys' school. It's been a while. Maybe some of you haven't heard it. I don't know. So here we go. This is Brian and the boys' school. I wrote this for actually a script writing class, like, I don't know, 30 years ago or something like that. So Brian was in boys' school, which Brian liked a lot. For though his age was youthful, his mentality was not. His parents, wise and wealthy, were of proper royal breed, and sent him off to boys' school to ensure that he'd succeed. He was nearly 9 years old, but the other boys were 12. When the other boys were naughty, their professors, he would tell. His ego was enormous, and spectacles he wore. He always did his homework, and mischief did abhor. His grades were always highest. He was an old professor's dream. The other boys were jealous and angry, it would seem, for he became the object of their playful little puns, and never could escape them, no matter where he'd run. They'd strip his bed of blankets, put flour in his sheets, and finally locked him in the attic to see if he would keep. Well, at first he screamed and hollered, but the professors never heard. The boys just laughed and chuckled to hear him so absurd. So he sat inside the darkness, and all he felt was fear. He gave a wistful whimper and shed another tear. But slowly he considered the solitude he sought. The boys had been a blessing in the bother they had brought, for now he was alone in a museum of the past, and sensed an opportunity to make the moment last. Well, nightfall finally came, and curfew was at hand. The boys were all in bed, but they couldn't understand, for Brian had been silent. For hours, it had seemed. They hadn't heard a holler, a whimper, or a scream. So they crept across the courtyard and up the dusty stairs, and peered in through a peephole to see if he was there. Well, they saw a broken window that peered into the fog, and heard the wind was howling through the branches of the bog. Well, they each began to worry and wondered what to do, and decided on a search in hopes to find a clue. Well, the attic was cold and cluttered with furniture and books, but bountiful with boxes and paintings hung on hooks. But Brian still was missing, and the boys were at a loss until they found a message beneath his holy cross. It said, "Dear Father, I am frightened. I'm terribly afraid. I sense an evil presence in this fortress they have made. In searching through the shadows, a sacred scroll I found that said unto this attic, a spirit it did bound. My curiosity was careless, and I spoke some words aloud. The wind began to whistle, and I heard a haunting howl. I'm standing at the window, and I gaze upon the moon. I can hear the demon breathing in the darkness of the room. This window is his exit, all guarded with my soul. I can smell the scent of brimstone. My terror takes its toll. So I write my last request, and ask it to come true. If I must now be buried, let the boys be buried too." Well, the boys turned ghostly pale as they read the horrid verse, and they darted for the doorway, so dreadful was its curse. But the door flew closed before them, and they turned and tried to run. They clamored in confusion, but their fear had just begun. "The demon is upon us!" they screamed in fearful pain, and they heard a horrid cackle that sounded quite insane. "Oh, demon of the darkness," they pleaded in their fear, "we're really only joking to lock Brian up in here. Please let this be a nightmare, and we're really in our beds. Let Brian be our buddy, and he really isn't dead." And with that, the door was opened, and they fled the demon's den. They swore amongst themselves that they would never joke again. But as they passed the open doorway, they had failed in their fear to see behind the door was Brian, and he was smiling ear to ear. For he had made this moment to carry to his grave. His joke had been successful, and the boys would now behave. Once again, I am the smartest, much brighter than the rest. Now I will be the joker, the master of the jest. So he stood up from the darkness and felt something on the floor. He peered into the shadows and looked behind the door, and there he found some parchment buried deep within a book. And curiosity overcame him, and he thought he'd have a look. Well, all was well when morning came. The boys were all behaved. The attic was forgotten and no reference to it made. But Brian still was missing when attendance had been called. His bed had not been slept in, and the professors were appalled. The school was searched for hours in every bush and tree. The dean was quite bewildered. Wherever could he be? Well, the boys brought up the attic and were quickly sent to look. But all that they had found was some parchment and a book. There was the slightest scent of sulfur, and they later found a shoe, and shortly found his spectacles that were cleanly broke in two. Days went by and weeks on end, but Brian ne'er was found. It was written and reported that he must have left the grounds. But the children, they know better, and they listen every night to the wailing winds of Brian as they echo through the night. The stories ne'er forgotten about the demon in his tomb, nor Brian and the boys' school that brought him to his doom.
Wow. Thank you, Lance. Masterful.
Thanks.
I hadn't heard that one before, so but
What?
even if I had
Really?
heard it before, I would have loved to hear it again. Thank you. All right. Our next storyteller is Jane. I know that I think I am just going to take a moment to stretch before I get Jane in the spotlight. So I invite you to, maybe stand up or, we're not taking a break.
Shake it around, huh?
Yeah. Huh?
Get
Yeah.
up and shake it around.
Yeah. Okay. And meanwhile, I just, okay. We'll get the spotlight in the right place. There we go. Hi, Jane.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Would you tell us a story, please? You've got a personal story for us.
We do.
Right.
Well, in 1962, I was 11 years old. And after about 5 years of living in rental houses, we moved to Pinole, California. Now, for my dad, the last couple of years of those 5 years, he lived in a Tenderloin hotel in San Francisco. And some of his fellow tenants were Haystack Calhoun and politically incorrectly now, but at the time, another group of about 4 guys were the Wrestling Midgets. And they spent quite a bit of time in the bar together, as I'm told. My dad was so happy to have a house again of his own, and he went about laying concrete sidewalks and patios and retaining walls. And my sister and my mother and I were requisitioned into helping with these projects. He was excited to have this home and make it the way he wanted it. And he loved making a garden. He loved building things, but he wasn't very fond of mowing the lawn. And we would get assigned to lawnmower duty. However, it was a pull string lawnmower, a pull cord, and a gas mower, really hard to start. My dad had trouble with it himself. So often my sister and I just could not run the lawnmower. So my dad was casting about for a better idea. And somewhere he came across this word. I want you to imagine angels as I say it. Dichondra. So The thing about dichondra was that it was supposed to grow only a certain height and stay there. So you didn't have to mow very often at all. Well, in order to have a dichondra lawn, you needed to prepare the soil. We had adobe mud. And so my dad wanted to amend the soil. So he bought horse manure and mulch, and he worked for PG&E in San Francisco, and he had a relationship with Lowry Paving. So one day Lowry Paving showed up in Pinole with a huge dump truck and dumped an immense mountain of sand into our driveway. Once again, my sister and I were requisitioned to move that mountain of sand into the backyard and get it spread around the back. Now, we did employ some Tom Sawyer tactics with the neighborhood kids, which worked to an extent. We had some help. My dad had a rototiller, and he plowed all that together to make a perfect medium for the dichondra. He carefully spread his dichondra seed, and we were requisitioned to go and very delicately sprinkle and make sure that the dichondra was not too wet, not too dry. And so eventually the little dichondra stems poked out of the soil, and we watched them carefully. Now, dichondra has a little round leaf on it. And amongst the little round leaves, we saw little spikes. And more of them began to appear. Then my dad assigned us to go and pull all of those spikes out one by one. Well, Karen and I knew that this was an immense job, but you didn't argue with our dad too much. So we were pulling and pulling and pulling, and we could not beat the little spikes. We just couldn't. We tried and tried and tried. And my dad was frustrated with us and with the lawn. As it turned out, the immense load of sand from Lowry had beach grass seed in it. And the beach grass was impossible to beat. So dichondra just faded away and beach grass took over. It can grow over fences. It can grow up the sides of trees. It can grow into the foundations of your house. Beach grass is odious. So not only did our yard get to have the beach grass experience, it spread into the whole neighborhood. Now, flash forward 58 years. My sister and I are trying to settle my parents' estate, and Steve and I have struggled with a automatic timer for a lawn sprinkler. We've gone through about 5 brands, and we're not doing too well. So often the lawn doesn't get watered as it should be. The lawn now is mostly beach grass and dandelions. Well, I was out there working the other day, and I looked down, and what did I see growing in green swaths here and green swaths there? You know what it was. Dichondra!
Ah, thank you so much, Jane. Wow. When you were talking about your sister and you having to pull out every one, it made me think of the folk tales and the fairy tales in which there's an impossible task, you know, separating, you know, so I love how, you know, oh, those old stories and our own stories have those connections. That was fun. Thank you. I'm glad I don't have a lawn of any kind. All right. Our next storyteller is Bobby Kincaid. And then after Bobby will be Larry. So Bobby, I'm asking you to unmute with a little thing, if that works. And I'm also going to spotlight the video on you. Okay. All right. Bobby has her own version of a story that we know, probably most of us, but not the way she tells it.
Am I still spotlighted to you guys? I get nervous when I watch myself, so I like the audience in front of me. Hello, everybody. This is a story that I have enhanced and re-envisioned and fabricated, and it was for my granddaughter. And then later, when I had my grandsons, I said, oh, this fits also. It's called Little Red Riding Hood, and I call it Innocent Red. Innocent Red, not so long ago, maybe today, prepared for her day out. She was dressed, she put on her cape, she got her basket, put her cookies in it, and then put her backpack on, grabbed her cookies, and stepped out on the porch. When she stepped out on the porch, the dogs laughed, "Beware, beware, beware, danger." And as she walked across the porch, there were wolves watching her. And as she opened the gate, the birds tweeted, be cautious, there's danger, be careful." And her cats came up beside her and wished their tails back and forth and followed her across the bridge that went across the creek. And they said, you have to be careful, you have to be careful. Well, she wasn't watching, and those wolves were walking right by her. And she steps on the path, and when she does, this crow sounded out. He says, protect, protect, there's wolves in the forest. And the birds were tweeting, protect, protect, save yourself, don't go. But she wasn't listening. She was determined to go on her way. Well, the wolves were watching her, and the father wolf had a plan. He said to his youngest, very charming son, just go and walk with her and invite her out for lunch. So the wolf went. And as Little Red was walking down, skipping actually, she saw this beautiful, handsome wolf there staring at her. And he had lovely brown eyes and this full head of hair, and he was just beautiful, and these long ears. And he says, my maid, would you like to have some lunch with me? I know the best cafe in the area. And she didn't quite trust him, but she said, well, why not? So she went along with him and went down the path, a little path off of her path. And they had this delightful lunch, but all he could talk about were the smells and the taste. And he just kept looking at her and smiling and smiling. And she thought, I don't feel comfortable here. And she looked at the young wolf, and she said, you know, I must be, and I should be, and I'm going to dismiss myself. I've got to see my grandmother, and I see the day is growing short. And she got up, she followed the path back to her path and started walking down. Well, Father Wolf was very furious, and he called them together, and he says, now you, next son, Gardener, you handsome, strong thing, you get her. We need a feast. So off he went, the next beautiful male wolf, and he was waiting in the flowers. And so here skips by Little Innocent Red, and he says, oh, hello, I see you might like flowers. And she says, I sure do. And he says, just follow me on this path and I'll show you some beautiful flowers. They smell so good. Well, she looked at this, and she looked at that, and she got to pick a few, and he let her cast seeds all over. And then she noticed that it was getting towards very afternoon, and she said, oh, Mr. Strong, beautiful wolf, I should, and I will go. I got to see my granny today. And with that, she started walking down the path, and she said, oh, this path went really deep in the forest. She gets on her own path, and she starts skipping along. Well, Father Wolf was irate. He was irritated, and he looks at his daughter, and he said, you're up next. I know that you like shopping. I'm sure Innocent Red would like shopping. Take her out. Get her shoes, get her gloves, let her try on things. When she's tired, take her down the back path. Well, there was this beautiful daughter. She was alluring, beautiful gloves on, and her hair smooth, and things dangled in her hair and her earrings. And she said to Little Innocent Red, wouldn't you like to come shopping with me? I know you can try on the best shoes and the best gloves. We'll just have a wonderful time. Well, of course, Innocent Red loved to shop, so she went with this beautiful, beautiful wolf that smelled so good into the shops, and they tried on gloves and they tried on shoes and they tried on hats. And finally, little Red, innocent as she was, got so tired. She said, look, I must, I shall, I will, I have to visit my grandmother, and I see it's growing later and later in the day. And she dismissed herself, and she goes down the path out the door, and she skips along, thinking, wow, that was really a narrowing escape. And by this time, Father Fox was irate. He was angry. He was just, anyway, called his oldest son, who was virile, and he was strong, and he was handsomely gorgeous. And he says, your turn. You have to get Innocent Red for us. He said, okay, Father. So Innocent Red was hopping down and skipping down the lane, and he was there. He had his hat on, and he was leaning on his cane, and he said, oh, I see you like to skip. I bet you would love to dance. And I know this wonderful place. It's a tavern. It's called the Wolfitarium, and they have beautiful music. Come on with me. Well, she loved music and dancing, so she went with him. And he talked, and the lady wolves came by him, and they stroked him, and he loved him. And she said, she looked, and it was getting close to dark, and she said, oh, I must, I shall, and I will. I have to go see my grandma. And she grabbed everything, and she ran out the door. And then when Father Wolf found this very virile, handsome man dining with all the ladies, he was more than angry. He went outside, he called all the clan together, and he says, all right, this is how it will be. Wife, you will go to Granny's house and eat Granny, or put her off somewhere so we can eat her, and we'll be there. So little old Red, she hops down the path, not knowing what's happening, enjoying the weather and the people talking. She's so merry. And she had her flowers, and she had her cookies, and she had her backpack on. And she enters Grandma's garden, and Grandma's not there. So she goes into the house, and the tea is boiling. So she puts the tea in the pot. She puts the cups on the tray. She gets out her cookies and puts them on a tray. And she looks out the window, and Granny's not in the garden either. So she goes into the bedroom, and there is this sick-looking person in the bed. She has Grandma's hat on and her gown, and she walks over, as innocent and naive as she is, to this person, and she says, Granny, what big eyes you have. And Granny goes and says, the better to see you with, granddaughter. Granny, what big ears you have. Oh, sweetheart, better to hear you with. Granny, what big teeth you have. And Wolf smiled real big and growled and howled. And when she howled, all the other wolves came in, and Red, who wasn't so innocent anymore, picked up that backpack, and she smashed him, and she hit him, and she roiled him around. And by this time, Granny came in with the woodcutter, and he had his axe ready, but little Red, she had beat him up so badly that those wolves were flying out the windows, crashing out the doors, and nobody ever saw those wolves along that path again. And little innocent Red stuck all those new things she learned in her backpack. And that's what's carried her on today to be the grandmother she is. And she sends out her warnings about those big bad wolves that are out there at every turn. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Bobby.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Old story, new version.
Yep. Got to do that.
I'm about to become a grandma. So
Oh, you'll love it. Oh, all the
really
grandmas out there. No,
grandma.
that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
All right.
Over here?
Larry Kluger, as also known. Oh boy. So Larry's been to our swap many times, but first time to come to the Zoom swap. So we're so glad you're here. Tell us a story.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Good. Historical tale.
Speak up.
As a major in the United States Army, stationed at a fort in Northern California following the Civil War, I have many duties. I have figured that one of my duties is to try and find a solution to a problem we have with using cannons against the Indians. Different types of cannons have been used by the US Army throughout the 1800s. Classified by their trajectory, there are guns with a low trajectory, howitzers with a medium trajectory, and mortars with a high trajectory. And each one is very useful when used in the proper situation against traditional enemies. Against the Indians, though, they're not effective. By the time those cannons are set up, loaded, aimed, and the fuse lit, those Indians who fight from horseback have moved off and are someplace else in the battlefield. I figured that somehow I might be able to find a solution to this problem. One day when I was working with a small mountain howitzer, an idea came to me. These small howitzers are designed to be broken down so they can be packed by mule over mountains to level spots from where they can be used in battle. Just as I was taking the barrel off the base and loading it onto the mule, the idea hit me. What if we forgot about the base and loaded the barrel onto the mule in a manner that it could be fired right off the animal's back? Using cannons against the Indians would be much more effective. Excited about my idea, I rushed back to the fort to share it with the post commander. After scratching his beard for a while, he said, "Okay, but first, let's test it out before we use it in battle." That very next morning, I strapped the barrel of the howitzer onto the back of the mule, and with the muzzle pointing off the animal's backside, I led him to a bluff overlooking a target in the middle of the river. The rear of the mule was facing the target as I backed him up gently to the edge of the bluff. Up to this point, well, the post commander and a number of other officers were standing in a semicircle as I stepped up and placed a time fuse in the touch hole of the howitzer. When the fuse was set, I lit it and stepped back towards the other officers. Up to this point, the mule had been handling this without a fuss, but now he was edgy. Could have been a number of reasons. The unfamiliar weight of the howitzer, the steep drop-off at his rear, or the hissing of the lit fuse, or a combination of them all. Whatever it was, he was definitely uneasy. He turned his head around to try and figure out what was going on. And as he did so, his body turned and the howitzer began to sweep the horizon. That mule was very curious, and his curiosity grew more and more intense. In a couple of seconds, he was standing with his forelegs in a bunch, making 6 revolutions a minute as he chased his tail. The muzzle of the howitzer was threatening certain death to anybody within a half a mile. The post commander took refuge behind a nearby tree, while the junior officers slid down the bluff into the river, disregarding any possible damage to their high-priced uniforms. The adjutant, the commander's assistant, ran for the fort as I hit the ground, probably with a loud groan. In 2 minutes, there was a puff of smoke and a dull thud as the mule went somersaulting over the bluff. The poor animal landed in the river, anchored to the riverbed by the heavy howitzer. Meanwhile, the cannonball barreled towards the fort, hitting the chimney on my quarters, rattling adobe bricks down in the parlor and frightening my wife into insensibility. The mule was rescued, and the other officers dusted off the howitzer and put it back into storage. I don't believe the post commander ever filed a report of our experiment with the War Department. I am thankful for that. It was enough to be embarrassed in front of my whole fort. It would have been another thing to be embarrassed in front of the whole country. There was an epilogue. I got this story from a newspaper, the Grass Valley Union, from Grass Valley, California, 1874. the newspapers serve the northern mining communities of California. The story appears to describe an actual military experiment, not a hoax. The names of the officers were not given, apparently to protect the guilty. Thank you.
Ah, thank you, Larry, and thank you for that postscript, because I was going to ask you, is that true? Wonderful. Bit of California history. Thank you. Okay, our next storyteller is Camille. So let me cancel the spotlight on Larry, and I'm going to bring it up. What just happened? Camille, there you are. Wait. Spotlight video. There we go. Okay. Camille, welcome. And again, another apology for leaving your name off my list.
That's all right.
Happy you're here.
Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such a sight, and the dish ran away with the spoon. Do you remember nursery rhymes? When I was a little girl, I had a pop-up book full of nursery rhymes. My favorites were Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Jack and Jill going up the hill. I always thought Jack and Jill were boyfriend and girlfriend. I found out later that they were siblings. And Baa Baa Black Sheep. If I had written Black Sheep, it would have gone something like this. Psst, Black Sheep, you got any wool? Man, I got 3 bags, fool. 1 for the man, and 1 for my boo, and 1 for the brother down the avenue. But my favorite nursery rhyme of all time is Hey Diddle Diddle. I like the word diddle because it rhymes with words like piddle and spittle. But the thing about nursery rhymes is they never tell you the whole story. Tonight, I bring you the unabridged version. When I was in my 20s, I had a set of dishware just like the ones in Hey Diddle Diddle. You see, the spoon was in love with the fork. He longed to kiss her tines and caress all of her patterns. He would dream of meal times just to be near her. He longed to touch her silver skin, and he hoped for the day when he and fork would be on the dish together. But that never happened. Fork spent most of her time with the knife. Fork would hold down the food and knife would cut it into bite-sized pieces. The spoon was jealous of the knife and the knife knew it. Sometimes he would brush up against the fork just to make the spoon mad. In the dishwasher, the utensils were separated into different holders. The knife would laugh and laugh at the jealous little spoon and make fun of the shape of his head and the way that he was dunked into hot drinks like coffee and tea and hot bowls of soup. Look at your little round head. You ain't never gonna get close to the fork. She's all mine. Well, the fork was oblivious to the spoon's feelings for her. She rarely saw him, and when she did, interaction was minimal. Truthfully, the fork was attracted to the curve of Spoon's head, but at last she was too shy to say anything to the spoon. The spoon's only friend was the dish, but the dish had gripes of her own. She hated the way the knife and the fork would scrape against her. Night after night, the chafing and scratching. She despised the knife and the fork. I love the fork, confessed the spoon. Why? Said the dish. Those skinny tines will only hurt you. She doesn't even know you're alive. Besides, divulged the dish, I love you. Look at us. We're both round. Let's run away together. And they did. One night, when the house was quiet, the dish and the spoon bolted through the doggy door. And the little dog laughed and laughed to see such a sight. They ran down the sidewalk until they encountered a playing the fiddle. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Bewildered at the runaway dish and spoon, the cat laid down his fiddle and gave chase. Meow, meow. Well, being unfamiliar with the outdoors, the dish and the spoon ran into the street and were run over by a motorbike. The dish was smashed to smithereens, but the spoon, he was scratched up and his head was warped, but he survived. Sobbing, he headed back home. He said to himself, when I get back home, I'm going to tell the fork how much I love her. This will be my last chance for a happy life. So Spoon popped back through the doggy door, pried open the dishwasher, and jumped in the holder with the fork. There, he told her of his undying love. Oh, Spoon, I love you too. Then he kissed all of her tines and caressed her patterns, and that is how sporks were made. And when the cow heard of the love story between the fork and the spoon, he was so delighted, he jumped up over the moon. And that, my friends, is the unabridged version. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Camille, I am never going to load my dishwasher the same way again in my life. That was delightful. Thank you.
That was a good time.
All right, a good time. Well, I am going to, Sally is going to take us out in a minute, but before we do that, here's a word from our sponsor. This is the Storytelling Association of California that is providing us with our Zoom hosting, and and is the umbrella organization for all the swaps around that are using Zoom, and they're bringing all kinds of wonderful events, including tomorrow night, which would have been our usual night, but is the Stories in Living Color. And Shags, if you want to put any information about that in the chat, I want to just also say, everybody, I hope you tellers have been looking at the chat, because all kinds of people are telling you how wonderful you've been and how much they've loved your stories. So take a look at that, everybody. And Shags, Shags put in the SAC website where you can just click on that if you're looking at chat, and then go and find out about tomorrow night's event. I'll be there. I hope I'll see you there. But now let's turn it over to Sally to take us out. And Sally, you need to unmute, and I will mute.
Okay. Unmute myself. Okay. All right. Great. Okay. All right. I'm going to take us out with, I hope, a relevant fable. On a stormy day, the crab strolled down the beach and was surprised to see Lobster getting ready to take sail. Lobster, Lobster, you can't go out on a day like this. Oh, yes, I can. I love a day like this. I love a squall of the ocean. Well, I'll come with you then. And so Lobster and Crab got into the little boat and they sailed far out into the sea. Oh, don't you just love it? Don't you love the sound of the waves, the spray of the salt? Oh, isn't it wonderful? Lobster, we're sinking. Well, of course we're sinking. The boat is full of holes. Remember, we are children of the sea. And down they went. Horrors, horrors, horrors. And when they got to the bottom of the sea, to the floor of the sea, the Lobster calmly walked the Crab across the sea, across the sand, and she felt so much better. In fact, it had been a wondrous adventure. How brave we were! How wonderful we were! Yes, indeed. In fact, it had been poor crab a very, very special, not ordinary day at all. And Arnold LaBelle's moral of that is, even taking a small risk will add excitement to your life. And I thought to myself, I need a better moral than that. And so, never trust your fears. They don't know your strengths. And so here we go. We're going into the next week, and we're going to gather our stories together and bring them to us and bring them out into us, and think about all your strengths, and don't submit to your fears. So go out there, be strong, tell stories, come and see us next month. We'd love to have you. Good night, everybody. Good night. Good night.
Hi.
Good night.
Great to